So we're going to start in Mark chapter 10, 35. Mark chapter 10, verse 35. I'm going to read it a little bit, and I'm going to try to make some sense of what's going on here, and perhaps connect with other thoughts here. And so it's Mark chapter 10, verse 35. So here we are in verse 35. James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came forward to him and said to him, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." And he said to them, "What do you want me to do for you?" They said to him, "Grant us to sit, one at your right hand and one at your left, in your glory." But Jesus said to them, "You do not know what you're asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, or to be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized?" They said to him, "We are able." And Jesus said to them, "The cup that I drank, you will drink, and with the baptism with I'm about to be baptized, you will be baptized. But to sit at my right hand or at my left is not mine to grant. It is for those for whom it has been prepared." When the 10 heard it, they began to be indignant at James and John. And Jesus called them to him and said to them, "You know that those who are supposed to rule over the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great men exercise authority over them. But it shall not be so among you. Whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. For the Son of Man also came not to be served, but to serve, and give his life as a ransom for many." So I read this maybe a week ago or so. Within the last week, I read this paragraph, and there are many things that spoke to me about it. First of all, I want you to notice that this is Mark. The book of Mark is Apostle Peter's testimony. We know that because history tells us. Eusebius of Caesarea, one of the early historians, tells us that that the author of the book of Mark was Peter. Peter was illiterate. He couldn't read and write. So he used Mark to put it down, his memoirs. So this is, put yourself into Peter and try to see it from the way that he saw this event. So let's dive in a little bit, and I hopefully we'll have some light into it. So we have two brothers, James and John, coming to Jesus. Verse 35, I love the way that they phrase their question. Hold on one second. Hey, Java. You want to sit over there so I can actually see you?
Sure.
Java just joined in person. He was actually driving here.
Which verse, which chapter are we in?
We're in Mark chapter 10, verse 35. So I just read from Mark chapter 10. I just read from 35 to 45. So we have this event here in verse 35. John and James goes up to Jesus and they ask him this question. Actually, it's a request. "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." I love the way that they phrase it. "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." I'm thinking like, this is quite a bold way of approaching someone. You're going to say, why? Well, we're going to ask you something, but we want you to do it. It's like you generally don't approach somebody this boldly. You generally request something, and they hopefully will respond to it in kind, but we're not generally typically this bold. It tells me that they had that kind of relationship. It's like when you have this kind of relationship, this is what I want you to do. You ask this person, you really need to be in that relationship that you're confident enough that the other person actually is going to do it. Otherwise, you wouldn't approach them as such. I just want you to know that this is a good example for us. Are we, I want to ask this question, can you approach Jesus this boldly? And if you can, great. If you cannot, why not? Partially, we often cannot because we don't have the kind of relationship with them, but they do have this kind of relationship. And the goal is to have this relationship where you have this kind of confidence that you can approach Jesus, and when you ask of him of something, that you have confidence that he's going to do it. In verse 36, Jesus says, and he said to them, okay, what do you want me to do for you? So Jesus is all ears. In verse 37, they said to him, grant us to sit, one at your right hand and one at your left in your glory. Wow. So these two brothers have been contemplating on Jesus' glory, that he's going to sit on some throne someday. And one of the brothers requests that if he can be seating on his right and the other one on his left. Two most important seats, obviously, if Jesus is going to be on a throne. But I want you to notice that this is actually a very interesting request. First of all, I want you to notice that also that the other account of this event, they involve their mother. They actually ask their mother to come along, and mother actually chimes in as well. That's Matthew chapter 20, verse 20. They actually get their mother also to come along, and mother actually throws herself at Jesus' feet while they're asking this question. So they have all gotten the whole family involved with this beautiful request that they have and the great boldness that they approach him. Verse 38, but Jesus said to them, you do not know what you're asking. Are you able to drink the chalice that I drink, or to be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized? Verse 39, they said to him, we're able. And Jesus said to them, the cup that I drink you will drink, and with the baptism with which I am baptized you will be baptized. Verse 40, but to sit at my right hand or at my left is not mine to grant, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared. So Jesus hears them. Jesus responds and say, look, first of all, are you willing to suffer? Are you willing to drink from the cup of suffering? I am going to suffer. And are you willing to be baptized with the baptism that I'm going to go through? Jesus is talking about his suffering. Are you willing to do what I'm willing to do to deserve to sit on my right and on my left? And their answer is what? They say, yes, we're able. And Jesus doesn't actually says, no, you cannot, because they end up actually suffering for Jesus. James becomes the second martyr in the Bible, meaning James becomes the second person recorded in the history of the Christian church to be killed. I think it's around Acts chapter 10. He gets put to sword. And but Jesus tells them that those seats are reserved for people, and it's not up to him to determine who's going to sit there. So he cannot grant what they're asking. What does he say? It is not mine to grant, to sit on my left or on my right, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared. I want you to notice that Jesus already, prior to this, told them 3 times. Once in Mark chapter 8, verse 31, Jesus tells them that he's going to suffer and they're going to be killing him. Chapter 9, verse 30, he tells them again his death, how they're gonna how they will kill him. And in chapter 10 again, verse 32, he again tells them that he's gonna be killed. So when they're asking right after on 35, this is kind of peculiar because I don't know if they're getting it, that Jesus is actually telling them he's going to be killed. 3 times already in the last couple of chapters. So it's kind of confusing if you think about it. So if he's going to be killed, and they're asking for him to be, John and James are asking to be seated on his left and right. It's like what are they asking really? Jesus does say, I will be resurrected, but it's unclear to them what that means to them. They're unclear. They did not know what that meant, rising from the dead. And why is this thought surfacing now? In chapter 10, this whole thought is rising in actually, there's a little backdrop to the story. In Mark chapter 9, 33 to 37, what happens prior to it, around chapter 9, one chapter prior to it, Jesus is going to climb up a mountain to meet Moses and Elijah. And he takes three of his disciples. There are Peter, James, and John. You may be wondering, why did Jesus choose those 3 ones? And also, how did the rest of the apostles, who were not asked to come up the mountain, felt? And so when they come down from the mountain, around verse 33, I'm going to read this too. I'm going to read 33, 34, and 35 of Mark chapter 9. They came to Capernaum. When he was in the house, he asked them, what were you discussing on the way? But they were silent, for on the way they had discussed with one another who was the greatest. And he sat down and called the 12, and he said to them, if anyone would be first, he must be the least of all and servant of all. So early on, they had this conversation about who would be the greatest, and they were talking among each other who would be the greatest. So when Jesus is approached by James and John, there's a little bit of a backstory, basically. So the 3 came down from the mountain. On the way, they were discussing who would be the greatest. The disciples are probably putting up candidates. Is it Peter? Is it John? Is it James? Is it somebody else among us? They're talking about it. And Jesus says in verse 35 to them, and this is Mark chapter 9, it says, if anyone would be first, he must be the least of all and servant of all. Keep these two thoughts in your mind. If anyone would be the first, he must be the least of all and the servant of all. So when we go back to chapter 10, to the story of John and James asking Jesus so that he can sit on the right and left, so there's a little bit of backdrop about it. So they did not properly understood what Jesus was talking about, being a servant of all and the least of all. So I want you to notice that Jesus does not discourage them from being great. He doesn't say, oh, you're such a terrible people, you're so prideful, you want to be the greatest. Even though the effort that they make in verse 39, actually 41, it says, and when the 10 heard it, they began to be indignant at James and John. So the 10 of the apostles are unhappy about what James and John has done. They don't feel good about it. They feel like perhaps they want to be greater than them. And it just doesn't sit right with them. in verse 42, it says, Jesus called them to him and said to them, you know that those who are supposed to rule over the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great men exercise authority over them. He's telling them in the world, this is the way things are done. The people that are in charge, they are the lords. They lord over other people. And their great men exercise authority over them. So when we look around, we see the world system that is so today. The people with the most money, people with the best looks, people that are smartest, people that are most educated, they are the ones who rule in the world that we live in. They are the most admired. But verse 43, look at what Jesus says, and 44. But it shall not be so among you, but whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever will be first among you must be the slave of all. For the Son of Man also came, not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. So Jesus is coming and making things right for us. What he's saying is, yes, that's the case on this earth, where men exalt themselves over others because they have more money, they have better looks, they're perhaps physically stronger or taller, perhaps they have more education because they have skills, talents. But in God's kingdom, God's church, it's not like that. He tells us that God does not value any of these things at all. Why? Because it's Him that gives it all. In 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 7, Paul writes to the Corinthian church, and he uses this language. Let me just quickly read it. It says, for who sees anything different in you? What have you that you did not receive? If then you received it, why do you boast as if it were not a gift? It says, what do you have that you did not receive? If you look around, everything that people have has been given. Nobody chose where we're going to be born. Nobody chose their parents. Nobody chose their skin color. Nobody chose whether they will be good with math or not, whether they can sing or not. Nobody chose. It was all given. What do you have that has not been given? Everything on earth, all humanity who has everything, it's given. Everything you have is given. It may not be clear to you today, but if you think about it, everything you have has been given to you. You did not choose your hair color. You did not choose your heritage. You chose nothing. You did not choose whether you're going to be able to go to university. You did not choose any of these things, in the sense that, like, if the opportunity wasn't given to you, you would have never been able to do it. So God looks around and He knows that all of these things are given to Him and is scattered as gift to humanity. He's not impressed with any of it. In His eyes, the greatness doesn't lie in any of them, whether you have a PhD on a subject or not. in his eyes, or heavenly greatness, lies in those couple of verses in Mark chapter 10, verse 43 to 45. Right? In 43, but it shall not be so among you, for whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. For the Son of Man also came, not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. So he's telling us what God is impressed by. Last week, Java shared about true fasting, true prayer, true giving that has to be done in secret. Why? Because we're trying to do it to please the Father. And if you're concerned about the Father and him being pleased, it's going to happen in secret. Right? Those are Matthew chapter 6, I believe.
You're getting a couple of texts. I think Andrew and Rob would like to get that in.
All right, let's see if we can get them in. So what is God impressed? So God is not impressed by the things that he's given to man and the man is boastful about. I was talking to a fellow about just a little less than 2 weeks ago. He was, for the first time, he was telling me that he had 2 sets of twin daughters. So he had the first twins. They were born, and one of them was perfectly healthy. The other one apparently did not have enough oxygen. Did not have enough oxygen and lived a very, very challenging life and died at 21, while the other one had full life or still alive. And then they had a second pair of twins again, and they were also girls. And one of them, while she was riding her bicycle, at 6.5 years old, had a brain aneurysm, which is like blood collecting in part of the brain, ballooning inside the brain, and she died within 24 hours. It was just clear to me that sometimes, one of them has everything, the other one just didn't have anything. It was just the way it was. And therefore, man has nothing to boast about. Man cannot boast about any of the things that have been given to them. That's what 1 Corinthians chapter 4:7 is telling them. What have you that you do not receive? If then you received it, why do you boast as if it were not a gift? So God is not impressed by the things that we're impressed. God doesn't honor the things or respect the things that man honor. What does he honor? What does God consider to be great? He cares about the people that love other people. That they will become, in the kingdom of God, things are different. This is also like how you know whether this is the church of God, if a particular group is a church of God, or it's the church of men. In the church of men, people are still earthly. They still value some of these things that we're talking about. Money, talent, good looks, education. In the church of God, this is what they value still. And their leaders do exercise authority over them or lord it over them. In the church of God, it's different. The people that do understand Jesus, they understand that they still want to be great, but not on the eyes of men. They want to be great in the eyes of their Father. And how are they going to become great in the eyes of their Father? By being a servant, by being a slave, by serving, by giving. Right? For the Son of Man, verse 45, also came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. You're going to say, how does this look like today in 2023, wherever we live in? What does this look like? How do we see greatness in the eyes of God? How do we live our lives where we're not concerned about what people think of us, how they rank us, how they value us, but that we're seeking greatness in the eyes of God? Jesus is the example of it. How did Jesus do it? He came to give. And ultimately, he gave his life as a ransom. What is a ransom? It's like when you pay a money to somebody is kidnapped, and you give them the money that the person is asking to release this person. Or somebody is going to be punished for crime, and somebody goes and pays for their fee. So Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. I'm telling you, this is how you're going to know if you're in the church of God or in a church of men. This is how you're going to know. It's people that are made out of examples of Jesus, or they're worldly. That's how you're going to know if they're following Jesus or not, because they understand these teachings. They understand these thoughts. They understand true greatness. They're doing it to seek from the Father and not from men. I'm going to read one more paragraph in Revelation, last book of the Bible, 5, and I'm going to conclude it. So I may read here and there and then maybe skip it and kind of conclude it. This is Revelation, the last book of the Bible, chapter 5, verse 1. And I saw in the right hand of him who was seated on the throne a scroll, written within and on the back, sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, "Who is worthy to open the scroll, break its seals?" No one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or to look into it. This is John, the apostle, who's taken up to heaven, sees this vision. He is the one who's talking about. And he says in verse 3 again, and no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or to look into it. And I wept much that no one was found worthy to open the scroll or to look into it. Then one of the elders said to me, "Weep not, behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has conquered, so that he can open the scroll and its 7 seals." And then he talks about a little bit about he sees in heaven. There are like living creatures. There's 24 elders. They're playing. They're holding a harp. They were singing a song. But let's pick up on verse 9. It says, "And they sang a new song, saying, Worthy are you to take the scroll and to open its seals. For you were slain, and by your blood you ransomed men for God, from every tribe and tongue and people and nation, and have made them a kingdom and priests to our God, and they shall reign on earth." Then I looked, and I heard around the throne and the living creatures and the elders the voice of many angels, numbering myriads of myriads and thousands of thousands, saying with a loud voice, "Worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive power and wealth and wisdom and might and honor and glory and blessing." And I heard every creature in heaven, on earth, and under the earth, and in the sea, and all therein saying, "To him who sits upon the throne and to the Lamb be blessing and honor and glory and might and forever and ever. And the four living creatures said, Amen. And the elders fell down and worshipped. You want to know what a greatness is in heaven? Is the way of Jesus. You want to be great? Jesus doesn't discourage people from being great. He just shows them the true greatness looks like. Heavenly greatness looks like. He shows them what the Father of humanity, how he sees true greatness. He sees it as men humbling themselves on behalf of their brothers and other humans and becoming their slaves, and to give up everything so that they can know the Father, so they can be reconciled to the Father. So like a lot of the times you hear this gospel preached that the gospel is not going to cost you anything, that Jesus has done it all. It's not true. It's going to cost you everything. You have to give up everything. Luke chapter 14, 25 to 33 says, unless you give up everything, you cannot be my disciple. It's going to cost you everything. When Jesus talks to John and James, you want to sit on my right and left? Are you willing to do what I'm willing to do? Are you willing to drink from the cup I'm about to drink, which is suffering and death? Are you go through the baptism, which I'm willing to be baptized, the flogging, and all the suffering that is ahead of me? And what does John and James says? Are they shocked? Are they shocked that Jesus is talking about suffering? Not at all. They say, we are willing to. They understood the cost of following Christ. They're willing to give up their lives already. So you cannot be a follower of Jesus unless you're also willing in your heart, because it may actually, your life may be demanded from you someday. But I want you to notice that in Revelation chapter 5, there was no one on earth or in heaven or under the earth was worthy to open up the scroll. We don't know what the scroll symbolizing here, so I don't have any great wisdom about what this scroll is all about. I just know that Jesus was worthy to open it. He was the greatest of all. It was the greatest of all that he was worthy. And I hope I can show you a glimpse of it, so that you're inspired to be a follower of your teacher, that this is the way of greatness. And not in the eyes of men. If you're seeking it in the eyes of men, I pity you. I pity you. What a waste of your life. But if you're seeking in the eyes of God, that is a noble call. That is what you need to be doing. How can I be great in the sight of my Father? How can I imitate my Father? You're going to say, it was Jesus any different than the Father? No. This is the character of our God, our Father. God was in Jesus. Jesus didn't do anything on his own. He was doing exactly what his Father taught him how to do it. This is the character of our Father. This is the true heavenly greatness that he's calling us to. To be a slave of all. Forget about looking for recognition. Just benefiting the people around us, whether it's our fellow believers around us or the lost world, right? Jesus was willing to die for the people on the street so they can know the Father. How far are you willing to go for them yourself? I mean, this is a calling for me. I don't want to, again, every message, I pray that it will speak to me as well. But you want to be great? Great. Be great. He's not discouraging us seeking greatness. Just don't do it the worldly way. Do it God's way. And he will be pleased with you. And so I'll end there. And if there's any comments or thoughts, you can unmute your telephones and we can talk.